Disclaimer: the contents of Studio 151 podcast and the TU Communication Disorders Connection podcast do not represent the views and beliefs of the University of Tulsa and the Mary Kay Chapman Center.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of the TU Communication Disorders Connection podcast. This is your host, Alyssa Hall, and today I'm joined in the studio by two very special guests as we dive into the Big Nine area of fluency. Our first guest is Natalie Anderson, who is a first-year graduate student at the University of Tulsa, and Natalie is also one of my classmates. Natalie, it's good to have you here today.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Our second guest is Shelby Mills, who is an SLP, currently working in schools and private clinics. Shelby, it's good to have you here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
I'm going to hand it over to Natalie to get us started with some questions.
Thanks, Alyssa. So to start us off, Shelby, how did you become interested in speech-language pathology, and where did you go to school?
So I didn't even know this field existed until I started stuttering in middle school, which is a very late onset. I started getting speech therapy when I was a sophomore in high school. I did not like speech therapy, so I quit, oddly enough. And then I ended up getting speech therapy again when I was a senior in high school because I found out I was going to be a valedictorian speaker. And so I knew I had to get some sort of help to be able to be fluent to speak to all those people. And my speech therapist, my senior year, changed my life completely. And so I knew I wanted to do that for someone else. I went to 3 different universities. I went to Southwestern Oklahoma State University, or SWOSU, for my first 2 years, and then I went to the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center in OKC for my bachelor's, and then I went to OSU for my graduate degree. I did not plan to go to that many universities, just kind of happened. I became aware of my stutter when I was in 7th grade, I believe. I had always been very social, and then it wasn't a certain day I remember exactly, but I know that I was trying to speak to one of my friends in the gym, and all of a sudden I couldn't get my words out. I was blocking, and they just walked away. And I knew right then something had happened, and so I knew I was different from that point on. I'm sure I received a formal diagnosis from my speech therapist, but you'd be surprised how unaware you are of what you're doing in speech. We're really good at being sneaky about it, so I'm sure I got a formal diagnosis, but I'm not entirely sure.
That first therapy experience you weren't a big fan of? Why were you not a big fan of speech therapy at first?
So, which is funny because we're friends now, me and that therapist are friends, and I did an internship under her, but I just think there was something that I was needing hope, and I came in and I felt like that wasn't what I got. I knew inside that my stuttering was never going to go away, but I didn't need someone to tell me that.
Yeah.
I needed someone to tell me that they could help me be a good communicator outside of my stutter. And as a teenager, you have all of these emotions and hormones, and it was just, I don't think I was in the right headspace to receive therapy at the time anyways.
I'm so sorry that was your experience.
She's an amazing speech therapist. It was just, I don't think I was in the right headspace to receive therapy at the time.
Yeah. It's like a work together process too. So
you have to be ready and available to talk through things, and I don't think I was there.
Yeah.
You talked about some of your stuttering experience in middle school. I'm wondering, can I hear a little bit more about how your valedictorian speech went?
So that actually, so I'm a Christian, and there was a lot of prayers going up. I'm not going to say I didn't have an awesome speech therapist too, but it was definitely a mix of some good speech therapy and God, because I was completely fluent my entire speech, although I was basically mute leading up to the speech. I had become so nervous, I just blocked every time I opened my mouth. And so I got up there, and it was at Rayleigh Chapel at OBU, so it was huge, and I got a standing ovation. And it was all about, God and how he shaped my life and how he walked me through my stuttering and everything. So, and I actually met a speech therapist through that who was at the graduation, and she messaged me, and we're still friends to this day. So,
I love that.
Yeah.
It's an amazing story.
It was really cool. I mean, I still would have, I think, had the same response if I had stuttered through my speech. So, it's not because of my fluency, it's because of doing it. I was given an option to not do the speech because of my stutter, and I said, no, I earned this.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that.
How long did you continue doing speech therapy?
So I did speech therapy for my second semester of my senior year in high school, and then I did it throughout the summer, and then I went off to college in Weatherford, and so I didn't have speech therapy from then, and then I started receiving speech therapy again during graduate school at OSU.
Wow.
So I got speech therapy while I was doing therapy. I had 2 fluency classes. So I did fluency in undergrad at OU, and then we did it again at OSU in graduate school.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really cool, like, learning about, like, what I deal with on a daily basis. And so it was really neat to hear that. And then we had those pseudo-stuttering assignments.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if y'all have done that yet. But I was like, can I be exempt? Like, my whole life is a stuttering assignment. But I just wrote about my own experiences. I didn't have to go make new ones.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
but my friends were all like, is this what you deal with? And I said, yes, this is what I deal with. Like, welcome to the club. It's great. But yes, it's neat learning about things, and I'm still learning things, and the research is still progressing, and I'm interested to see where it goes.
Yeah. We hear a lot in our fluency classes now about, like, how so much of intervention for fluency is, like, counseling.
It's
especially
shifted a lot, too.
for, like, teens and younger.
Mm-hmm.
Did you receive any kind of, like, counseling type therapy back in the day?
Like with a speech therapist, or...
Yeah.
Yes. So I feel like my speech therapist doubled as a mental health therapist.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's so many emotions, like the iceberg analogy. You have the top that has all of the behaviors that you can see. You can see the repetitions, you can see the prolongations, the blocks, the tension, you can see the secondary behaviors, but you don't see all the feelings associated with it. And so there was a lot of times when we would just talk. Like, my speech therapist in graduate school, she was a supervisor there, and she also stuttered. And so we had a lot to bond about with that, but we also were able to talk through things in a way that someone else couldn't because they didn't understand it. And so I just felt like I was able to get not necessarily better therapy, because you can be a good speech therapist and give good fluency therapy, not as a person who stutters. But it was nice to have that empathy there and the understanding.
That kind of goes along with our next question of how has your experience with stutter helped you relate to your clients?
I got to work with a lot of clients who stuttered when I was in graduate school, because a lot of people would travel to come there because of my supervisor who stuttered, because she was really good with fluency. And so I got to work with preschool, school age, and adults who stuttered while I was there, which was really awesome. Most people don't get that experience. And I know with my adult who stuttered, she really loved the fact that I stuttered too, and so we could talk about that, and we would joke about, like, if you could be fluent in any language, what would it be? And we're like, well, English. And so we would make jokes, but we would also, like, talk about the really hard things about, like, job interviews and just dealing with people who are ignorant of the fact of what stuttering is and that it doesn't affect your intelligence. And so we did a lot of mindfulness and a lot of making sure we have positive self-talk versus beating ourselves down when we have a disfluent day. And so that helped a lot with the adult. And then with the younger ones, the parents really enjoyed having me because they could see that their child could still go on to live a life and be successful even with a stutter.
Yeah.
I used to be a lot more severe than I am now, so therapy works.
I'm just curious. I don't think we actually asked, how did your stuttering, like, manifest? Like, what kinds of stutter?
I primarily have blocks.
Okay.
If I'm having a really bad day, I'll have, like, clusters. Like, I'll start, like, repeating things too. But I mostly, like, unless you're looking at me, you don't normally know I'm stuttering because blocks are silent. And then I also have secondary behaviors. So before I went to college, my jaw would open and it would be like, and I'm like, I'm stuck, I can't get it out. And then when I went off to college, my whole head started moving. And so I do that. I have head movements. And people are like, why are you doing that with your head? And I'm like, buffering. It's coming. But, like, most people are very nice about it. But there's some people that will be like, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, I stutter. And so, like, my stuttering doesn't typically present as people would think. It's not just the, what are you doing? Yep. And so people don't always know about the different types of stuttering, which does make it more difficult. I feel like I wish I had more of a typical stutter at times. I've had people ask if I'm, like, having a seizure or if I have Tourette's, and I'm like, no, just stuttering.
The head movements?
So, yes, it's like this. Like, it does
like
that.
Jerking back, kind of.
Yeah.
That's really
It's just really fun. But if I'm, like, using my techniques and really watching it, I can control it. But some days I just don't want to have to deal with my stuttering. So I just kind of blow through it. Or thrash through the cornfields, as my speech therapist used to say. It's great.
It's quite an expression.
That's a new one.
She's like, you could go down the aisles, you know, the rows. But you just go diagonal. And I'm like, yeah, I know.
You may have mentioned briefly some strategies that you use around your fluency. What are some of the strategies you feel like you reach for the most often?
So I prefer to use the, what I would say for my younger clients is stretchy speech, but it's initial prolongations. So I'll, like, kind of stretch out my first words, or, well, one thing that I'm using right now is proprioception. And so I'm thinking about what my articulators are doing while I'm talking, which is something that you can't always do for a long period of time because it takes a lot of thinking, but it helps you get through times when you need to be more fluent. I also like to use voicing, so, like, so much with my blocks, your vocal folds slam shut, like there's nothing happening, and so with my voicing I can keep that from happening, and I can keep my vocal folds moving, which will help prevent blocking. Oh, I also like easy onsets because you get your, like, airflow going first. That helps me out with introductions a lot of times too. Introductions are terrible.
Ooh. What is it about introductions that makes them difficult?
It's just because it's the time pressure too, and it's also very automatic speech, and so, like, you're not gonna sit there and think, I'm about to say my name, like, it's just something very automatic. It's not like you're waiting to raise your hand in class and, like, you have to give an explanation for an answer. It's something very automatic, and so it's very easy to not think about it, and then you get stuck all of a sudden. And so, and there's also that time pressure, like, someone asks your name, they don't expect you to pause. Like, you're supposed to know your name. And so there's that expectation too. And so all of that combines makes a really terrible outcome. So I like to use a carrier phrase, and I'm like, my name is Shelby.
Yeah.
Or I'll get my air going first. But people are like, did you forget your name? I'm like, yes, I have dementia. I forgot my name. Like, I don't know. It's just, people ask really insensitive questions, and I'm like, who asks these things?
Yeah.
Like, I don't go up to someone in a wheelchair and say, like, hey, get up. Like, I don't know. Like, it's honestly comparable to that. Just because my disability is not as visible as someone in a wheelchair does not mean I don't deserve the same respect.
Yeah.
Is there an experience that comes to mind that you'll play back in your head?
It's usually the things that don't go well that tend to stick with you, sadly. But that's just how it is. Like, people don't tend to leave reviews unless they have a bad experience somewhere. Am I wrong? I mean, it's true.
Yeah, that's true.
So when I was in college, I was 18 years old. I was in Weatherford. And I had to find a job because you're broke when you're a college student. And I needed money for just gas and food and whatever else. And so I was interviewing at different places. And it's hard because, like, my stuttering was just getting progressively worse. Like, it was pretty severe at that point. And I interviewed at a restaurant in Weatherford. And in the interview, like, right off the bat, she realized I had a stutter. And, which is fine. Like, it wasn't like I could hide it. I wasn't a covert stutterer. And she asked me if my stuttering was going to affect my ability to do the job. She said, is your stuttering going to affect your ability to do this job? And I said, no, look at my resume in front of you. I've held jobs. I said, yes, I might take a little longer to get my words out, but I can effectively communicate. And she wanted to put me on deliveries because she said she didn't want me with the community, like at the front of the counter. At the end, she said, "Do you have any questions?" And I said, "Yes. Is my stuttering going to impact me getting this job or not? Because it seems like it's going to." And she said, "I don't know. We'll have to see. I'll give you a call." And I said, "Don't bother. I don't want to work for you."
Yeah.
Yes.
And I left. But I seemed strong in that moment, but I went to my car and cried because I had just been denied a job because of my stuttering, which is very illegal. My sisters wanted me to sue, and I said, "I'm 18 years old. I'm not suing anybody." It was just an eye-opener knowing that I'm going to have to advocate for myself. No one's going to do it for me. And so that's what I'm very adamant about with my clients is I make sure they can advocate for themselves. I'm like, I don't care if you're a fluent person or not.
Yeah.
You can stutter throughout your entire life, and you probably will. But you need to know how to advocate for yourself. You need to know what is acceptable and what is not, and when to stand your ground. And so that's what's very important to me, and that's what I strive to tell my clients, or to at least tell the parents of my clients when they're littler. I'm like, advocate for your child. Like, don't let anybody think they're less than because of their communication.
Yeah.
So
to have that drive, like, you were 18.
18.
That's pretty young.
Yes.
To, like, have that sense of self-worth, like, so established.
I mean, I had always had friends that would stick up for me, but I was in a new place, so I was like, someone's going to have to do it, and it's going to have to be me. So.
And an interview is already scary as it is.
It is. So I was stuttering more than I probably would have, and then I ended up getting a job on campus with at the grill, and so I got up at 6 a.m. for work. I'm not a morning person. And she told me, she said, "I don't care how you talk. I just want you to be a good worker."
Yeah.
And so I went back and thanked her years later. I said no one else would hire me. She had a son with Down syndrome, and so she was very open with people having disabilities or anything like that. And so she gave me a chance, and I worked there for 2 full years.
Yeah.
But advocating is very important, whether you stutter or whether you have articulation or whatever it is. You could not even have a communication problem. You got to advocate for yourself.
I liked how you mentioned informing parents about advocacy. Is there any other recommendations or things you would like to tell parents?
I feel like it's almost harder being a parent of a child who stutters versus being a person who stutters. And I've talked to my parents about that, and I've also talked to other people who do stutter and also have a kid who stutters, and they agree. Because the person who stutters knows what they're dealing with. They know you get thick skin really fast. And I honestly got to the point where I was shielding my parents from things because I didn't want to make them sad. Because I knew I could handle it, and I didn't want them to worry, and I knew they already worried. I feel like just having that open, honest communication with your child, especially as they become aware of their stuttering, is very important, and not just letting it be the elephant in the room. It's very easy to just tiptoe around it, but that just makes it worse. Just talk about it as it is. Let them know that you're there if they need to talk about anything, and advocate for them until they can advocate for themselves, and then show them how to advocate for themselves. I also would say, like, they're going to be okay. Don't worry. Like, I know they're going to worry, but, like, they're going to be okay. Kids are very resilient. As long as you give them the tools they need to be able to succeed and give them the option for therapy and do your best to surround them with positivity around their stuttering, they're going to turn out okay. But it's just make sure that you give them room to process their stuttering and make sure you give them room to be able to deal with it in the way that they want to deal with it. They might not be ready for therapy at certain points, and that's okay. So pushing it is not going to help, but there's times when they might need a break from therapy, and then they can come back later and they'll be more ready. But there's definitely a whole lot of emotions with it, and they need to be aware of that.
Well said.
That's great advice.
I did a lot of research and looked up a lot of things on stuttering when I was working with my adult client in graduate school. And there was one thing I found on there, and it was 20-something things I wish I had known as a person who stutters when I was 26 or something, I'm not sure. And one thing on there's always stuck out to me, and it's something I always try to remind myself. And I also always try to remind my clients and my parents of my clients that stutter. It says, I wish I had known that fluency is not a success and stuttering is not a failure. Because I feel like so many SLPs are stuck on the physical aspect, the manifestation of the stutter itself. And they're working on decreasing that amount of dysfluencies, which is great. Like, yes, that is part of our goal, to help them become less severe. But our main goal is to make sure that they can communicate effectively. You want them to be able to be an effective communicator, whether they're stuttering or not. You cannot be a person who stutters and be a terrible communicator, and vice versa. And so I just always need to remind myself and my clients and the parents of my clients, just because you have a good fluency day does not mean you're more of a success than on a bad stuttering day. And so, like, your worth is not measured by the amount you stutter. And so I feel like that is really easy to link, especially in your head when you feel like, I should be able to speak. This is the simplest thing ever. 2-year-olds do it. But it's a very complex thing, and one thing that goes wrong in the brain can have a whole construction crew kind of thing going on. Like, I tell the kids, I'm like, it's going through a construction zone. There's going to be potholes along the way, redirections. It's how it goes. But I feel like it's really easy to measure your worth by your ability to control your stutter, and that's not the case. So I always try to remember that for myself and for my clients, and just so they know that, like, their worth isn't measured in that way.
I like that advice. All right. With that, I think we're going to wrap up our discussion. I want to thank both of you for joining us in the studio today. Natalie, it was good to have you here.
Thank you so much. I had a good time.
And Shelby, thank you so much for coming to talk with us and for figuring out all of our scheduling stuff. I'm glad that we pushed through and worked through that, because I think you have such a unique perspective as both a client and now a clinician. We get a lot of SLPs, we get a lot of clients talking on this podcast. We don't get a lot of both at one time. So thank you for joining us today.
Both. Thank you so much. It was great.
For further information or podcast ideas that you'd like to share with us, please reach out at 918-631-2504. We would be happy to chat with you. Remember, communication is not just about words. It's about understanding, empathy, and connection. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep communicating.